Patrol, episode 3, Dead Patrol. Okay. Now, in the last episode, when everyone got shot by the red alien guy, I just figured they were like stunned, they were knocked out, maybe somebody was going to take their bodies and do something with their bodies. Come to find out, they actually died. They all actually died. And they were in a raft. Like, we're talking about Rita, Cliff, Jane, and Vic, Cyborg. And they were all in a raft with the Grim Reaper, and they were being taken to God knows where. And Rita right out the gate was like, okay, so basically we've died. And the rest of them were just, they weren't in shock the way I thought they were, but I was the one who was in shock because I'm like, yo, they're really gone. Like, they're like dead. And then I'm just like, didn't they just do that on Titans? Like, Titans just had an Afterlife episode called Souls. So... And I thought the way both of them handled purgatory and the afterlife, or at least trying to get to the afterlife, I thought both of them handled that very well. It was very cool to see. So anyway, so they're being brought to, I guess, the waiting room of purgatory to decide what's going to be, what's going to happen to them. And just before they get to, their destination, Jane, Cliff, and Vic, they pass out on the floor. Rita doesn't pass out for some reason, but just before they get to shore, Rita sees a whole bunch of like ghouls or like goblins or something. So because everyone else passed out, and she was like, what's happening here? She just like pretended to faint as well. So the four of them get snatched up by the ghouls. They get taken into this room. They get hung up on, on top of something. And I guess like they're just there hanging there, like waiting to decide if they're going to pass on or if they're going to stay in purgatory or whatever the case may be. Now, each one of them, for some reason, Rita was the only person who for some reason wasn't completely dead. So maybe her metahuman abilities kicked in when she got blasted, but she still had a lifeline. I mean, it was a very weak lifeline, but it was still a lifeline nonetheless. So she never got put in a situation where she was headed to an afterlife. So she kind of like woke up, and then, like some random guy with a disfigured face, he grabbed her and pulled her out of the cage that all of them were in. But the other three, they were still involved in their whole like afterlife situation. Cliff ended up going to a place where he saw his dad. And I was wondering to myself, if Cliff is going to the if Cliff died and he's going to the afterlife, why does he still look like a robot? This would have actually been the perfect situation, because they always try to come up with situations so, to make sure that the actor can actually play himself on the show and won't have to be the robot. This was the perfect situation to do that, because if Cliff is dead, he wouldn't look like a robot. He would look like himself. But anyway, they chose to let him be a robot. So he bumped into his dad. He was talking to his dad. Him and his dad got into a conversation. Cliff obviously cursed him out the entire time. And, he was just like, oh, unlike you, I was a better dad to Clara. And then, his dad was like, oh, Clara, my sweet Clara had a baby. And then Cliff was like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, you're sweet Clara. Apparently Cliff's dad said that his daughter Clara had reached out to him, and that she had a relationship with him while Cliff was in the Doom Patrol being a robot. Cliff was like freaking out because he was just like, there's no way she would reconcile with a piece of shit like you. He was like, yeah, but didn't you just say she reconciled with a piece of shit like you? So now Cliff's really upset. And then that's when the moment came where, because his dad said, he was like, yo, I'm basically just like the welcoming committee. I'm supposed to, take you to your afterlife. And he said, your afterlife is right down that path. And then Cliff was just like, good, like, screw you, Pops. And there was a moment where Cliff actually left the window open for his dad to say something nice to him and for them to actually have a good moment. Because right before he left, he was just like, so is that all you want to say? And then, his dad was just like, yeah, that's it. And then Cliff was just like, screw you. And then he walked away. Jane is very interesting because Kay, it's not so much that Jane died. Kay was the one who died. And Kay, the little girl. Kay represents Jane. Well, Kay represents the childhood innocence of the girl, before her dad touched her. And when the girl grew up, the girl grew up to look like Jane. It was kind of fitting that both Kay and Jane were both at the purgatory, the purgatory together. The house that they were at belonged to Kay's grandmother. And when she met her grandmother, like the two of them embraced each other. And then the grandmother looked at Jane and she was like, I know exactly who you are. Please come in. And they had a conversation. So, Kay's just running around, talking to her grandma, hugging her grandma, playing in the house. And Jane and the grandmother were having a conversation. The grandmother told Jane, she was just like, you're not the only person that failed the girl. She was like, I failed her too, because when I realized what her father was doing to her, I couldn't get her out in time. And instead, like, her dad took her from me. And, she was like, that was my biggest regret. And then, Jane said the same thing, because she was like, yo, I failed that little girl like a million times. And I don't know why she keeps me around, to be honest with you. And then she was like, because you're strong. And then the grandmother went to a case, and the grandmother had a cabinet case that was full of dolls that she made. Every single doll that she made represented one of the personalities inside Jane or inside Kay. So what they're basically trying to say is her grandmother created her metahuman personas, her grandmother created her multiple personalities, and thanks to Niles Coulter, those personalities actually came to fruition. She said that one of the dolls that she created was the Jane doll. And she said when she created the Jane doll to be flawed but strong at the same time. And she would be the strongest of all the other dolls. And she would be the one that was best suited to protect her daughter. She knew all about the underground and like the whole situation. And that blew Jane's mind. And then after that, Jane was just like, well, if that's the case, she was like, well, why can't we just stay here? She's like, why can't the girl just stay here? And then she's like, no, she can't, because she has to go to her own afterlife. And then she told Jane, she was like, but you got to go with her, and you two will be fine together. Like, you'll be her companion and you'll protect her throughout the next journey and beyond. So, just right then and there, the path for both Kay and Jane, to go to their afterlife popped up. And then, they walked over to accept that. Cyborg, he bumped into his mama, and him and his mom went on a nature trail, and they went climbing up some rocks or whatever. They had a nice little conversation. She told her how, like, her and her dad, like, her and his dad, they used to go, like, rock climbing all the time. And then, Cyborg got emotional. He apologized for the accident. She told him, don't cry, Victor. And then, and then he told her about Ronnie and everything. And then she told her about how his dad turned him into a cyborg. And, they said he apologized for the whole situation with the accident. And, and then, like I said, the two of them, like, they really reconciled that whole thing. It was very beautiful, very touching. The tears were shed. And then the path for Victor's afterlife, popped up. And then, she told him to mosey on over, and go take that path before it was too late. So now that takes us back to the mansion. And while we're at the mansion, because Larry's been there by himself because he no longer has the negative spirit. And then he got a ring at the doorbell. And when he got a ring at the doorbell, there were 4 boxes sitting in front of the front porch in the front lawn. When he opened the box, he saw the dead corpses. Well, not all 4 of them, because Cliff was in pieces. But he's basically saw the dead bodies of the 4 people who were trapped in the afterlife. So then Larry starts, he starts crying. He's upset. He's like, oh, my friends. And then he's mad at the negative spirit because he's like, oh, you left me. I should have been here. And then Larry's freaking out. He takes all 4 of them, puts them in the kitchen, and puts them in the kitchen table, and has them sitting at the kitchen table. Dorothy comes home, and Larry freaks out, and then he ends up telling, because he can't hide it, put him at the damn kitchen table. So when Dorothy showed up, he told Dorothy what happened. Dorothy got upset, but then while Dorothy and Larry were trying to, like, come to terms with everything that happened, Larry was making pancakes. They were both making pancakes in the kitchen. And then, then Rita screamed out for help, and Larry saw Rita's face in the pancake. So he was just like, yo, Rita's trying to call out to me from the afterlife. So then Dorothy got the idea to talk to Danny. And then Danny, for some reason, hired, the cast of Harry Potter to to come over and to help them. It was something called the Dead Boy Detective Agency. It was 2 deceased British boys and 1 still very much alive American girl who just happened to have psychic powers. And the 3 of them click up together to form some sort of detective agency to help people, which sounds like something they ripped out of Scooby-Doo. So, Danny the car brings them to the mansion, and they're talking about how they can help out, as far as, like, reaching their friends. So they do this whole seance thing, and they were able to reach out to Rita. And then Rita was just like, through, like, one boy, Rita was just like, oh, Larry. She's like, oh, we're trapped here. And then, and then one of the kids was like, oh, it seems like they're trapped in purgatory, and then it's like, oh, we must save their souls. And then, they ended up talking, like, Larry and Dorothy ended up talking, like at least the two dead kids, to let them, for them to go into the afterlife to try to save the gang. They didn't want to do it at first because they were just like, yo, Death is in there and Death's a mean bitch, like she's after the both of us. But, like Dorothy gave them the sob story. They felt bad. They astro projected Larry, and then, like the two boys and Larry, they went into purgatory to go rescue the souls of their friends. Now, the American girl, she told them to get an article, an item, an object, something that has some sort of connection, to the deceased person. That's how they were able to communicate with Rita. So there were different items that were placed on the table, and only the one with Rita lit up because, again, Rita was the only person whose soul hadn't actually died yet. But then randomly, just before the other three members went into their afterlife, the items that were placed on the table that the psychic girl was trying to use to reach out to them appeared to them in their, in their afterlife moment. But right before Victor walked on the path, he saw one of his sneakers. Jane saw, like one of her brushes that she uses to paint with. Cliff saw like a little mini race car because, he builds race cars. And their choices were to either pick up the item, which is their connection to the mortal plane, or pass it over and go into the afterlife. So of course, all three of them touched the item, and it was appropriate because, Victor touched his shoe. They didn't show that though. Cliff picked up his car, and the funny thing with Jane, Kay was the one that picked up the paintbrush, which makes perfect sense because Jane isn't actually the person in that body. This is actually Kay's body. Jane is just a persona that was created because the girl got 75 personalities. So I thought it was very, see, I like, that's paying very good attention to detail. The fact that they had Kay pick up the toothbrush, and they had Kay pick up the paintbrush, and not Jane. So then all three of them snap out of their afterlife journey. They're back in purgatory. They break their ropes. They go fighting through. Just as they're fighting through the caverns, they see Rita. Rita ends up screaming. Rita ends up screaming when she saw them. Larry and like the two, the two dead British kids show up. The gang's all together. And then here comes Death. This crusty old lady ends up showing up, scaring the mess out of everybody. She turned into a demon, and they were just like, "Oh, we're not afraid of you," and they ended up fighting her. But then the two boys, like the ghost boys, they were just like, "Yo, we ain't messing with this bitch because like she can actually do horrible things to our soul." And then this very deformed man, the one that pulled Rita out of the cage, he walked up to Rita again and he said, "Oh, I know you don't remember me, but don't worry. I'll distract her long enough for you guys to escape." And then, he told her, he was like, "Yo, remember what I said, kid? Never let him see you sweat." And Rita's looking at him like, who the hell is this guy? So the guy jumps into battle. He ends up fighting Death, on their behalf. And then the whole gang ran away to escape. They all got on the boat, they took the boat out of there. They got out of purgatory, and then everybody popped up and got their souls back. There was a moment after they got their souls back where Dorothy was talking to the psychic girl, and then she was, because she was trying to reach her dad because again, like I said, there were different items that were on the table, and Dorothy tried to use an item that was close to her dad, and she put that on the table hoping she could reach out to him, and it didn't work. But the psychic girl had told Dorothy, she's like, "Listen, if everybody's going to tell you should get over what happened to your dad, but if you think you can reach him, fuck that, try to reach him, do whatever you got to do to try to reach him." And then after that, Dorothy took her advice, and Dorothy decided to go with the dead boy detective agency and the girl along with Danny. She decided to go with them to hang out with them to see if she can reach or find her dad. And it was very weird because you would think the rest of the house would have given her a hug or been a little bit more emotional towards her or whatever. They're all just pretty much like, "All right, peace." Dorothy was like, "I'm leaving to go with these strangers we've only met 2 days ago." And everybody was like, "Well, see you later. Don't forget to pack a lunch." And I was just like, well, that's kind of jacked up. that was like the most unemotional scene of all time. And I feel like it's Dorothy. Like Dorothy broke her neck to save you guys from like the afterlife. Like, the least you could do is give the girl a hug, But again, this is Doom Patrol, so that's what they doom. And then, so then after that, Dorothy left, which is basically saying she's a kid. You can't have a kid, child labor laws. You can't have her on the show that long. So that was the best thing they could do to get her off the show for a few episodes before you bring her back. And then while the whole group was just standing in the kitchen, just like going over, like all their personal shit in their own head, there was even a moment where like Larry had said to Rita, he was like, yo, who is that guy that saved you, when you were in the thing? And then she was just like, I don't know. And then he was just like, it's almost like he had the wrong Rita. And then she remembered the flashback of who we're assuming is Madame Rouge, when Madame Rouge ran up to her at the hotel resort and spa and slammed the door in her face and got her trapped and got her killed. So now Rita's just like, yo, suspicious about that, because she was just like, yo, there's this bitch walking around with my face. And then as soon as she says that, Madame Rouge comes downstairs, walks past Rita in the kitchen and starts making tea. And I'm like, like, what are we doing? Like, the whole group was just looking at her like, who is this bitch? And then they even asked her, they were like, who are you? And then she was just like, I actually haven't the foggiest. And then she was like, does anybody want tea? And that's how the episode ended. So I guess in episode 4, we're going to get the Madame Rouge backstory, but it still doesn't explain the Rita connection, because she didn't come downstairs looking like Rita. She came downstairs looking like what we're going to assume is her own face, like her original face. So Rita doesn't even know she's the person who turned into her and got them all killed when they were at the resort. That's going to be pretty interesting. But I hope we do get the Madame Rouge backstory episode in episode 4, because I would like to get answers for that as quickly as possible so we can move on to the plot here. And still no mention of the brain, still no mention of the gorilla, and why the Brotherhood of Evil is targeting Madame Rouge. And Rita's about to take the fall for that whole situation. But we shall see as time progresses. So thank you for tuning in. Leave your questions, comments, and or concerns down below. Where do we go from here with each character? Because the negative spirit is still out there in outer space. Larry is still alive. I don't know why. Cyborg still has the Ronnie problem. Cliff's still trying to be dad of the year. And Jane's still trying to cope with the whole case situation in the underground. Hit the notification bell so you get notified when my videos are popping up. Because we got Marvel's What If coming up. We got Stargirl, Supergirl. We got Titans. And we're still doing this Doom Patrol since Doom Patrol started. And then now that October's upon us, we're also going to have the regular fall schedule when the fall schedule comes up as well. Thanks for tuning in, guys. So until next time, from the Doom Patrol, from the Dead Patrol, take care. And I'm out this. Yeah.